Hello and welcome to the BurnCast. I'm Brady Byrne.
And I'm Kim Cass.
Today we're looking at a book called Brogan the Bounty Hunter by author Clint Clay. As always, any criticisms directed towards the authors of works that we discuss are exaggerated for entertainment purposes and are not meant to be taken personally. Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoy the show. Let's talk about Brogan the Bounty Hunter.
Let's talk about Brogan the Bounty Hunter.
Yes, and where to start with this one?
Well, as with all books, when we see them, the first thing that you see is the cover.
Yes.
So let's start there, because I just have a couple of quick comments to make. Clint, if you're listening to this, reversing colors on an image does not fit well for a Western story. So your translucent blue cowboy, not effective. Also, stick with one font. Why are you switching up fonts? And impact, really? It says Brogan the Bounty Hunter, and then Brogan again, and then Clint Clay twice. What is that?
It's really hard to read, yeah.
It's such a mess. And the first Clint Clay is, like, cutting over the second Clint Clay. There's, like, he didn't even give this a once over.
No, it doesn't look like a Western at all.
No, it looks like shit.
Yeah, if we're being honest. But in essence, it is a Western. This is your typical Midwestern cowboy. Goes out onto the land and does some bounty hunting, does some horse wrangling, meets some interesting, meets characters along the way.
He meets a Wendigo.
Yeah, exactly. Like some of our other stories, the book starts off kind of normal and then
turns to the supernatural.
Turns into a big shit show in the later half.
Yes. I do find that quite funny that it's like the story is so boring.
Yeah.
And they're like, I better throw a bit of spiciness in there. What could I spice it up with? How about a Wendigo? Like,
yeah.
The story isn't set up with any sort of mystical elements.
No.
And usually when you have a crossing of genre, where you're playing with the supernatural or something, it's usually introduced quite early on, like the idea that there could be some magic in it,
Or at least some kind of hint that while the characters aren't aware of any supernatural thing, that you as the reader get kind of clued into it, or at least gets you on the train of thought towards it. And this, I was almost ready to put this book down before the Wendigo shit. I really told Kim, I don't know if we should actually talk about this one. It's so boring and dull and nothing is happening. And then I went back to read just a few more pages. It was like, oh, okay. There we go.
It's so funny. How could you predict that? Going through this book and you're like, oh, there's not going to be anything in this. There's just, this is it. And then one or two more pages and all of a sudden it's supernatural. And there's shape-shifting Wendigos. And, not that it made the book much better, but...
Oh, no. No, the book is by itself awful.
Yeah, it suffers from a slew of major, very basic issues that we have known and loved through our BurnCast careers, so... Yeah,
and it's always a fine line between we see something and we're like, oh, this is bad enough to talk about. But sometimes it seems like such a low ball that it's like, is it worth going after?
Yeah.
And this was bordering on that for most of the story.
Yes.
And the main reason for that is because of the startling lack of grammar.
It's truly, you don't really have to be very good at writing to recognize where to put commas.
Yeah.
Or just use any at all, right? Because there's basically none in this.
No.
Which is really problematic.
And not in a cool, hard target kind of way.
No. I'm surprised there is a cool way to have no commas, but yeah, it's not hard and punchy. It's just literally lacking them where they need to be.
Actually, it's very hard to tell what the hell is being said half the time because of the lack of commas.
Yeah, and it turns all of these characters into a computer speaking the lines, because when a computer reads writing, it says it in this very stilted way, and that's how it sounds all the characters saying it as well, because without commas, there's no intonation, there's no anything.
Yeah, so I'd like to give a few examples of that, but first we need to talk a little bit about the story. So we start off with Brogan. He's on some sort of bounty hunt after a guy named Schooner Took. And we get a big info dump in the beginning, talking all about how Schooner Took went on some kind of bank robbery job and it went wrong. And honestly, it really assaults you with the backstory of a bunch of people who got killed who don't even appear in the story.
Yeah.
It goes into like the relations between Native Americans and colonial Americans.
It does it in the worst way as well.
Yeah.
It's like, Brandon's out there, and he's on the chase, and he sees the man down below, and there's that Took man, and he just went on a bank robbery, and he lost his whole crew on that bank job, and they all got shot. And then this is how they got shot.
Yeah, it literally goes character by character. The people in Took's gang, how they got shot.
Yeah, got shot.
And you would think that's like an immediate arrest thing. Like, oh, yeah, we start off like he's on the hunt. He sees the guy. We get a tiny little snippet of who he is, who he's after. And then we'll get into him like catching the bounty.
Yeah.
Nope.
No, you gotta hear. You gotta hear about this man's backstory.
Yeah, like his whole fucking life.
And it also goes through people's clothing, good descriptions. Love that, because I don't know what a cowboy looks like, so I need that information, right?
No.
I mean, just an example. It sets up the story that Brandon Brogan is an ex-sheriff, right?
Yeah.
So he's an ex-lawman turned bounty hunter. And it tells you this in painful exposition. However, a cool way to do it would be like that, he reaches down into his pocket and pulls out his old sheriff's badge.
Yeah.
He's still got it, because he's still trying to be a sheriff, but he's not a sheriff anymore. You could play with something like that.
Yeah.
But instead,
No.
tell me. Just fucking, bash me over the head with it until I'm dead, yeah.
But, so, one of the funny things about this book is that, yes, it gives us a ton of backstory, yet the actual action in the story is very curt. Like, to the point of it's hard to even tell where something happened.
Yeah.
He spends all this time talking about, Took is down there on the ravine and, he's like hunting him and this sort of thing. And then it just kind of skips to Took's last thoughts were that he should have never tried to rob a bank in his hometown. That was a place where everyone knew him and knew he was up to no good. What a stupid mistake. Like, that's just one sentence, no commas.
Yeah.
And it says, Bran waited. He never approached a down man without caution. Patience was important, and he waited an hour, and the man did not move. Which I found funny, because he, shoots this guy. We barely even get a chance to let that simmer in. And then he sits there waiting for an hour before he even goes to check if the guy is dead.
Yeah.
And what a parallel to the story. That's exactly how I felt reading it. As I'm like, yeah, I'm sitting here waiting for something to happen.
Yeah. Now I'm waiting for an hour.
Yeah.
And then he goes over and the guy's dead, and it's just... It feels to me like you need to put an effort to make a bounty hunting story boring as fuck.
Yeah.
It's so, the story pretty much writes its own excitement, and yet somehow this man's managed to load it with exposition and then skip all the action. Why? Why do it that way?
But so he takes this guy into the local town to get his bounty for it, and he meets the new sheriff in town. It's this young guy, and says, "It wasn't Sheriff Ben Blocker who had been the sheriff of Laramie for years, it was a kid." Again, that's every other sentence.
I know.
That should be, several sentences, It wasn't that sheriff, it was a kid. But no, that's just one thought. And he has, a little spat with the lawman, because he's like, you just a kid. You ain't no sheriff yet, boy.
Yeah. It's so generically bad as well. This is the interaction. The man was probably in his early 20s, if that, and Bran had never seen him before. "What happened to Ben, son? He went and got himself killed." "That's too bad. What happened?" "He rode out a few days ago to investigate a staged robbery and got shot." "Who do you have there wrapped in with that blanket?" "This is Shuna Took. I've come for my bounty." "Well, let me see his face." And the two men stepped forward into the bay, and Took had been draped across... And the two men stepped down to the bay that Took had been draped across, and Bran peeled back the blanket. "That's him. Let me get you a certificate to take to the bank. He was trying to rob it here a week ago, and then I will take him to the Undertaker's. I believe he is also has a reward coming from Utah too. It may be a few days before that one gets here. We will wire you to. We will. We will have to wire it to you then. Then, Mister, it would be a good idea if you left town. He had kin here, and that would mean trouble. Well, give me a certificate, and I will stay in the hotel until the one from Utah gets here. I'm not worried about that trouble. I can handle myself. What's your name, boy?" "My name is John Locke, and I ain't no boy. I'm the new sheriff here. Are you planning on having the job long?" "No, it's just temporary." Boy, you don't know how temporary it is. What do you mean by that? Son, you're as wet behind the ears as anyone I've seen, and it's easy to see you're no lawman.
And then he goes, I got asked by the town fathers to take the job when our sheriff got killed. Well, son, you going to find yourself in the same way if you don't wise up soon. What do you know about being a lawman while you're just a bounty hunter? And Bran says, I know a lot about being a lawman. I was one long enough. You were a sheriff? Yes, I was. Now, how about you getting me paid? Oh, come inside and I'll get you the certificate for you and Mr. I don't like you very much.
Like, what? Come inside and I'll get you the certificate for you and Mr. I don't like you very much.
Yeah, it looks like it says, and Mr. I don't like you very much. Like, I think it's supposed to be like Mr. and Mr. comma, I don't like you very much.
Yeah.
And Bran says, I get that a lot, but it doesn't bother me. And then we get a nice little character moment here. It says, Bran had lied, for it did bother him, and it had been wearing on him. And that is never picked up again.
No. And to be honest, when the characters are so cardboard, like, there's barely any emotion in the story. You need commas for emotion, apparently, because this is...
There are things I kind of take for granted in writing, because I don't really think too much about the commas. Like, oh, wow, the fact that comma there makes this really punctual. Only if I'm writing something does that cross my mind.
Yeah.
But I'm discovering in our little journey through this podcast just how essential they are.
Yeah.
They're not like a nice spice that you sprinkle over some already well-done text to like give it some flavor. You need some fucking commas in there. Yeah. Not just to like break up the pacing, but because I literally can't tell what's being said sometimes.
Yeah. You know, I want to scream at people that are learning to write and just say, look, if you want to write, there's reasons that things work the way they do. And you can't just glide past them and be like, well, it's just a grammatical thing, you know, they'll get over it. No, like, no.
No, like I literally can't read this. The next part of the story, Bran goes off into the land to like find his next job. And he comes across this like lone woman named Elizabeth, who has a Native American son, and they just call them Indians in this book. It's the Old West. Whatever.
Yeah. It actually calls them half-breeds in the narration, so...
Oh, yeah.
That I found very difficult to read.
Yeah. There's also this brilliant little part of the story where it says, Bran thought then that the woman...
It's so hard to read.
I know.
It's so hard to read.
Bran thought then that the woman had never been married, for the name Carson wasn't a Hispanic name. Which leads to an amazing little conversation where he assumes that she's Mexican because her son is like brown.
Yeah.
We get her backstory that she went off and had hooked up with this Native American guy and had a son with him. And then when she returned home, she was kind of an outcast.
Yeah.
Because, well, yeah, like the story says, she has a half-breed now.
Yeah. She's like, has to live outside of town and gets shunned out of the city and stuff. Like, pretty harsh.
Yeah. And so he hooks up with her, as the story goes.
Yeah, of course.
There's no, like, chemistry or connection between them.
No, there's a fucking bathtub scene. What more fucking chemistry do you need?
Yeah.
The guy takes a bath, stands up naked, and she likes what she sees, instantly falls in love, especially for the fact that he's just not racist. So that's a huge benefit, apparently, and yeah, instant love.
Yeah, no dialogue there. She just sees him naked, takes him by the hand, takes him to bed. But the next morning, they get up, and he, like, asks her if she needs any help with anything. And her response is one of the best and simultaneously worst sentences in this book. She says, "No, Bran, but thank you, and Bran, thank you for this morning." in one...
No, Bran, thank you for this morning, thank you.
In one breathless take. No, Bran, but thank you, and Bran, thank you for this morning. Look, the dialogue could be infinitely improved by commas there. You just say, "No, Bran, comma, but thank you, and Bran, comma, thank you for this morning."
Yeah. It adds so much more. Not only does it make sense, but it also gives you this thing where, like, she's pausing, she's like, "And Bran," you can hear it in your head how that sounds, and it's like she's thinking about what she's saying and really trying to make it so, like, he understands that she's thankful.
I can not only hear it, I can see it.
Yeah.
Like, you put a comma in there, and I can actually visualize what she's doing, where her eyes are shifting around, like maybe that her head is slightly tilted down.
Yeah, just from a comma or something. It's crazy.
And speaking to hearing it, maybe, a small smile cracks through in her voice when she says that. And you can hear like a slight hesitation, which implies like a yearning, it would give more context to the fact that she hasn't been with a man because she's been outcast. And here's this guy who shows up and he's not racist. And it's like, wow, what a fucking comma can do.
Yeah, what a fucking comma can do.
Instead, we get, no, Brad, but thank you. And Brad, thank you for this morning.
Thank you, Brad, but I am Elizabeth, but.
Yeah. And it's like really robotic, even his thoughts. It says, Bran thought it was odd that he had liked the sheriff and he had liked Elizabeth. He hadn't liked anyone in such a long time. And here in this small town of Laramie, he had found that he had liked 3 people already. Sheriff Locke, little Joe Carson, and his mother Elizabeth, who he liked a lot. And then it says, that moment that he and Elizabeth had shared that same morning had been very nice. That's like how the whole book is written.
Yeah. It's so funny because it's like, I have moved to a new town and I like 3 people here. This is good.
Yeah, that's literally like that.
Elizabeth is nice and her son is nice. Brandbot is pleased. Brandbot the Bounty Hunter.
New bounty acquired.
When you meet someone new, Brady, do you instantly tell them the most traumatic thing that's ever happened to you? Do you just go, when I was a kid, or like, my wife fucking got blown up?
Yeah, well, how else, when you meet someone, will they understand your backstory if you don't tell them right away?
Wow, yeah. And how will all the invisible people watching your life understand your backstory if you don't tell someone?
I love how that's introduced, though. So right as he shows up and he meets this woman, Elizabeth, he's commenting on her son, and he says, that boy of yours is full of energy, and you two are a long way from Mexico. And she says, we have never lived there, Mr. Brogan. Oh, ma'am, I am sorry. I just assumed that because Joe, your son, looks like he has Mexican blood. And she says, it is Indian blood, and if you have a problem with that, you can leave in the morning. And he says, ma'am, I have nothing against Indians. In that case, you can stay, but they are so hated out here. And then Brandon says, I had a son once, and he reminds me of him. And she says, oh, you were married? Yes, ma'am, I was. It was a long time ago, and I still miss them. And then she says, please, Mr. Brogan, call me Elizabeth and tell me about your family. Well, Elizabeth, I will if you call me Bran. I can do that, Bran. Now please tell me about your son. It's really like reading a conversation between 2 poorly developed programs.
Yeah. And he tells the story about, so he goes out, does bounty. It took a while, but I brought him in and collected the bounty. But once I got home, it was too late. My wife and son had died. Oh, Bran, that's terrible. I miss picnics and fishing trips and the warmth of a family. Oh, Bran, I am so sorry.
Well, Elizabeth, tell me your story. Bran, I have never been married.
Where are the fucking quotation marks? Who's talking?
This is all in one
mega paragraph.
This is all in one set of quotations, but it is supposed to be 2 different people speaking. It says, well, Elizabeth, tell me your story. Bran, I have never been married. I was taken from my parents' homestead by a young Indian, and he was a handsome man, and I wanted to go.
What?
Like, one sentence in a dialogue bracket, and it's like, come on!
He was a very handsome calculator, and I wanted to plug in with him.
It's so fucking hard to read. You don't even know who's talking half the time.
Yeah. So they were friends for some time, blah, blah, blah. And the people in the town don't like that she's shacked up with this Indian man, and they kill the whole tribe, every man, woman, and child. And then she was taken home.
Yeah.
And then the dad tells everyone that she had been stolen, so that she didn't go willingly. But she's pregnant, and then she gets disowned and exiled.
Yeah.
And that's Elizabeth's backstory. Great.
Yeah, so the next thing that happens is Bran goes off into the countryside again, and Elizabeth and her son want to go with him, because after one night of very passionate, emotional, robotic intercourse.
Bran is constantly like, I know I'm only staying for a day. I will leave. Goodbye. I will stay with you, but then I will leave. But I also love you. And Elizabeth is like, take us with you. And then he's like, okay.
Yeah. So he takes them with him. And they go off into the country, and she's like, I've just told you my whole tragic backstory and how my family hates me, but I want to stop there and say hello to them anyways. So Brandon is like, okay, Elizabeth, I will take you to your family. Let's go. Joe, I love you. You come along as well. And they go off into the countryside. They end up at Elizabeth's parents' homestead, and she has a good time there, and they sort of welcome her back into the home. She says, actually, Brogan, I know I just told you I wanted to go with you and be with you, but I'm going to stay here with my family. Fuck you. But you can stay if you want. And he's like, sorry, that ain't the life for me. You know, I'm a bounty hunter. I got to roam the lands and that sort of thing. And you're like, okay, guy doesn't get what he wants. Kind of sad. And the story has been pretty innocent up until now.
Yeah.
And then it gets to a point where things just sort of happen. I don't even know how they happen.
It's like a tornado ripped through this town, but the tornado was made of like plots that are never finished and like random supernatural shit.
I'm just gonna summarize what happens in the span of 5 short pages. The second after Brandon leaves Elizabeth with her family, this is what happens. Brogan leaves, and he becomes so depressed without Elizabeth that he goes to his hometown, crawls into the cemetery, and shoots himself in the mouth. And then, in the span of like 2 paragraphs, it goes back to how Elizabeth is back at her house, and her father tries to rape her, so she kills him. And then she goes to seek out Brogan. Somehow Brogan had survived and gets healed by voodoo powers, has a dream about the Wendigo, and we learn that Elizabeth's father had raped, murdered, and even ate children of Native Americans.
Yes. It even has this like weird line where he throws them into like the cooking pot.
Yeah.
You know? As you do, right? Because even cannibals, you know, they just toss children into a big cauldron like they're fucking cartoon witches or something.
Yeah, it says Baxter Roberts had killed his share of the red men. He had left his wife at home and had gone out with the other men and killed the red men. He and the others would rape their women and skin them and use their skins to make bags and pouches. Some of the children had even been added to the cook pot. And it's like, this guy, I get what it's trying to do. It's trying to make the point of like, back then, they thought that the Native Americans were the savages, but really it was the white man who was the savage.
It was the white man that was the savage, yeah.
But then it goes into the wickedness of Baxter and the other frontiersmen had enraged the Indians, and Wendigo had taken his revenge on him, causing him to mistreat his daughter, then by taking his voice, and last and most rewarding, bringing that child home to kill him.
Yeah, the insanity really stepped up at the end, especially, like, I couldn't actually tell what that meant. Like, what does that mean? The Wendigo possessed the girl, or possessed him to make him mistreat the girl?
Well,
so that he could kill the bastard? Like, what's going on? Like, can you give me another sentence to clarify, or just use commas in that one at the very fucking least? Like,
no, it just says, POTUS and Selma knew of Wendigo. Selma had seen a vision and knew that the woman in the east that waited for the sheriff had killed her father, and that it had been Wendigo's revenge. Yeah. All one sentence, no commas.
No.
Like, that's the amount of depth you get on this whole Wendigo commentary. It's just that, I guess, it's... I have to add this commentary.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't something I pulled from the book.
No.
I guess the idea is that the Wendigo is this spiritual force that works through people who experience trauma and misfortune to allow them to enact revenge.
Yeah.
It happens with Elizabeth, who, she was outcast, and then when she returns home, she kills her father. It happens again, like, some other time.
The ferryman thing? What was that? Like, Bran goes onto the ferry, and there's a lady on the ferry, and there's a guy, the ferryman, who's like, oh, take off your dress. And then she does, and then she kills him and eats him?
Yeah, she, like, eats his liver or something.
Yeah.
It's fucking weird.
Like, it didn't make any sense. I mean, I was looking at the words, and they weren't saying anything to me. Like, and Bran wasn't doing anything. He was just there.
Yeah.
And then he goes back home, or he just leaves the ferry.
It's so hard to tell what actually happened.
Yeah.
The worst part about this, though, is, okay, again, I'm going to take this book and give it a respectful, measured... I'm going to try and treat it as if I'm able to, like, make sense of the idea. So you have this Wendigo shit, okay? You got the voodoo stuff that's going on. The Wendigo is, like, a force that helps bad people get their comeuppance, okay? It does also comment that, Brogan is a guy with a good heart, so The Wendigo's not after him. Okay, got it.
Got it.
However, he's reunited with Elizabeth. They settle down together. He goes off on another bounty hunt, and he meets some prostitute lady.
Yeah.
And the guy who runs the inn that he's trying to stay at says, "Hey, mister, Lynn has room here in the house. It's another 20 to room with her." And Brogan says, "Lynn, that does sound nice, but I have someone at home." And she says, "They will never need to know, mister," said Lynn, as she pulled her dress off to show Bran what she looked like. Lynn was beautiful, and Bran put another $20 on the table. Sometimes even good men did bad things. It was being back on the hunt that had weakened his resolve.
Yeah, so like this is right at the end.
Yeah, this is 90% into the book, and it says, when morning came, Bran was very satisfied. Johnny had breakfast on the table, and Bran's horse saddled. And then he goes home, and no consequence to this, basically.
No. He just had a mean root right at the end of the book. Like,
yeah.
He just totally cowboyed that chick and then went home. Like,
yeah.
That's the life. Wendigo just pats him on the back like, yeah, boy.
Yeah, exactly. Like, he doesn't get his fucking liver eaten out.
No.
The last paragraph of the book says, Brandon boarded the train in Dodge City and headed back east. He had sent a telegram home to let Elizabeth know he was safely on his way, hopefully to a quiet life of raising horses. The train rolled down the tracks and it made several stops as it headed back towards Louisville and home. Brandon Brogan was ready to see his family and to give up bounty hunting. He was ready for the comforts of a home and reading by the fire. He knew Elizabeth, Joe, and his mother and father would have such a place for him. The end.
That's the whole chapter. Chapter 12, returning home, that paragraph, the end. Thanks for coming. Thanks for the cash. Goodbye.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Brogan, you're not going to have any penance to pay for sleeping around with some prostitute?
Yeah.
He just had a nice poke, and, I guess I regret that, but shucks, guess I'll go raise horses with my family now.
And maybe he visits the prostitute in the beginning of the book. And, it's like, I don't want to be with Elizabeth. I like the free cowboy life or something.
Yeah.
And then you have it at the end where he's like, no, you know what, I ain't going to settle down now. The bounty hunting life ain't for me, prostituting is bad. And I just want to be a good father to this child and a husband to this wife. No.
No, fuck all that.
Nah, fuck all that. He falls in love with this chick, shoots himself in the face, interacts meaninglessly with the Wendigo, and then has a mean root with the prostitute, and then goes home.
That's it.
And wow, what a hero! What a hero!
Either he sleeps with a prostitute in the beginning, and that's his life. He's too wrapped up in the bounty life to actually be able to settle down. But then he meets Elizabeth, and he, discovers that having a family is maybe what he wants.
Yeah.
And then the next time he meets a prostitute, he, doesn't sleep with them.
Yeah.
That would be a story. or you have it that he meets the prostitute in the beginning, and, he's like, I ain't got time for this shit,
Yeah.
Or that he tries to settle down with the prostitute, even though she's the one who isn't looking for that sort of life. And then he meets Elizabeth, but he's still drawn to, the lifestyle, and he succumbs to his weaknesses, and then he deeply regrets it, and then he shoots himself in the face.
Yeah.
But no, those things happen in fucking reverse. And he wakes up with the prostitute, he's just like, well, I should have done that, but...
That was mean!
Yeah. Oh, man.
Clint Clay, if you want to pick up any of these plots and use them, feel free. Another way you could do it is he bangs the prostitute in the beginning, meets Elizabeth halfway through, and learns about the family lifestyle, and then goes back to the prostitute and, convinces her to quit that sort of lifestyle and settle down with him.
Yeah.
So you can have a back and forth, either way you want to do it,
no.
But do something.
No.
Pick a plot, and not just... I feel like this is the sort of thing where chapter 12, the last thing, that's a real finger on the way out.
Oh, yeah.
Because, that's not an ending to a book. That's just I'm done writing. Fuck you.
Yeah, it's really like that.
I don't have anything else to say. I've done the prostitute scene. I've done the shooting stuff. Goodbye. It's kind of sad. I think it's not so much that he didn't know how to end a story because, there wasn't a story to begin with. So,
no.
What's he ending? He's not ending shit. If anything, he started more conflict right at the end and then, was just well, that's the job well done.
It's all settled now.
He should just murder a child at the end of the book too.
Yeah, when to go fucking help him at this point.
Yeah.
But speaking of endings, the last thing in this book is actually where we get to meet the author, which, when we have what seems like a very prolific author, I'm always glad that we get a little glimpse into the nuance of the man behind the pen. And it says, Clint Clay is a true gentleman of the West who believes in the cowboy code and riding true to the brand.
Oh, yes.
So here's a true gentleman who lives in the cowboy code. I'm uncertain what the cowboy code is right now.
Don't tell your wife about the prostitutes. That's the
Is it no remorse sleeping around?
Is it don't talk too harshly about the half-breeds?
Yeah, I mean, Jesus. Okay, and it says, it seems he was born on a horse, for he has had them all his life, never remembering a time he was without them. The author enjoys team roping and trail riding across the American landscape. He visits locations across America to ride the beautiful trails that exist in many parks and private ranches that occupy the United States. He loves to team rope with his friends and owns some of the best horses in the country. He and his beautiful bride have a small ranch that is nestled down in the southeastern part of Kansas near the mighty Neosho River. They are native of this area and have raised a wonderful family. He has numerous books published in the Western genre, and he is an avid reader of Westerns. His favorite writer, Louis L'Amour, has been influential to him. And then the last sentence is, there are many other writers out there that he loves, and he doesn't always read Westerns.
Okay, so don't think that he does. All right? Don't mix up facts here, right? Because there are other writers that he does love, and he doesn't read Westerns purely, okay? So
I cannot make sense of a sentence like that. Because it's like, okay, he just mentions one author that he likes. Got it.
Yeah.
In case you were confused, he says, but there are many other writers out there that he loves, and he doesn't always read Westerns. But no further clarification of that. Like, what are some of the other genres he likes? Like, just like the story, right at the end, it gives you like the doorknob bombshell where it's like, okay, the story's over, and as it's walking out, it's like,
but also, fuck you.
And you're like, what?
Fucking hell. So, yeah, that's the story of Brandon Brogan, and really the story of Clint Clay as well. You got all the information you wanted out of it, and, don't ask too many questions, because he's not answering those questions, all right? So just put it down.
And if you did get some answers to those questions, it might be that the program behind the writing of this book doesn't have the processing power to actually give them to you.
I kind of felt like this guy's more of a fan of like sci-fi because, this is a great sci-fi romance of two AIs that struggle in, their companionship modules.
Or aliens wearing human skin. Maybe this is really like a post-apocalyptic thing and they're wearing like skin masks.
Oh my God. Yeah, it's like Westworld.
Oh, yeah.
This is like an early run of Westworld where the robots doing the cowboy stuff are like still very like robotic and not quite there yet, and they're trying to act like they're cowboys, but obviously they're still metal hulks, So that could be an interesting twist. Clint Clay, listen to this podcast and you'll get a lot out of it, trust me.
Yeah, you'll probably get yourself a deal on HBO. I mean...
But don't ask too many questions, okay? Because he doesn't just read Westerns.
Maybe that's it. Maybe that's the hint, Maybe he's ghostwriter for Westworld.
Yeah.
So... what can I really say about this book? Again, I had almost said, like, well, why are we even talking about it? There's really nothing going on in it in the first half. And it's like, it was too innocent to really critique properly. It was just so poorly written that we don't want to punch down when we make this show. But then when you have racist undertones and when your writing is basically telling me to fuck off and to stop asking questions.
Yeah. And I think more importantly than that, if you have a character that doesn't develop, because in a story, whether you like it or not, there has to be some sort of character development or conflict or something like that.
Yeah.
And if your character just doesn't develop, then I kind of feel like that's a finger. That's insulting to the reader because that's not what you promised them at the beginning of the story,
Yeah.
And if I just wanted to read about people that stay the same the whole time and don't suffer the consequence of their actions or any notable, interesting things, then I'm trying to think of something that's like that, but there isn't. Even Wikipedia has stories to tell, jeez.
Well, I guess the idea behind the story is that, he is a bounty hunter and he's trying to escape that life. But that's not really the theme. There's no indication while he's doing the bounty hunting that he, wants to stop doing it.
No, he kind of loves it.
Yeah, the only theme here is that, he had a family and they died, so he went on the road, and, that's why he wants to settle down and that sort of thing. And that would be his character development, that now he can settle down, he can quit the grizzled life of a bounty hunter and have a family. That is all thrown out the way by him shacking up with the prostitute at the end and feeling almost no remorse about it.
Yeah, he feels fucking great about it.
Yeah, to quote the book, he felt very satisfied in the morning.
He's like, damn, that was a good night.
Yeah. So that's where it falls apart. Without that in it, it could say it's an innocent little book, harmless. It's not deteriorating the self-publishing market or anything like that.
Yeah.
Fun little Western you can pick up and read in a day.
Yeah.
But my cortisol levels are too high after reading this.
Yeah. I feel like this one was a brain drain. You just sit there reading it and you're like, oh.
Yeah.
Oh. I also have some other things I want to quote as well. So this is back when Bran is staying with Elizabeth and her son. Elizabeth stood and went into the house and finished making dinner while Little Joe and Bran whittled on the porch. A few minutes later, the call came from the front door. Boys, it's time for dinner. The two men stood and stepped into the house and washed up. The table was set and Liz asked Bran to say the blessing. Bran paused for a moment. He had not done this since his wife had died and child had died, and he was almost cried. He choked back tears and began, Dear Lord, our Father in heaven, I first ask that you forgive us for our sins. I secondly thank you for this blessing of good food and company and the opportunity for us to share it together. Thank you for little Joe here and Miss Carson for their kind hospitality. They have been more than generous. Amen.
Listen, the Lord don't need commas.
Oh my god. I just love the idea that he has to say grace and he this big bad Brandon Brogan, the big bad bounty hunter. He choked back the tears.
Oh man.
Oh yo. But he can't cry because he's not human.
Yeah. So that was Brogan, the bounty hunter. Next time we're going to be reading a book called A Clash with the Blue Demons.
Clash with the Blue Demons. Now, that's quite a title. This is our first book from India.
Yes.
And hopefully not the last book from India, because what we've seen so far has seemed pretty spectacular.
Yes. Now, let me just give you a quick synopsis from the book's introduction, which says, the fight between the good, in all caps, and the evil, in all caps, has been there since the ages of the kings and the wizards, also in caps.
Oh, the wizards. Now I know what time period.
The evil tries hard to subdue the good, but the good has the power of resurrection. In the times when wars were fought with swords, bows, arrows, and spears, on foot or on horseback or on chariots, etc., there was an evil wizard, Suko, who was trying hard to expand the power of evil to the last corners of the continent called Blazami. It gives us a pronunciation of Blazami. Finak, a wizard, was his biggest hurdle. The evil gets many hands, but the good takes its own time to find a proper one. The story takes place in the imaginary continent called Blazame, having two parts, North Blazame and South Blazame, separated by vast mountain ranges of Titlia.
Titty towers! Titty mountains!
Yeah, and the first part of the book is months of the year, days of the week, maps, all kinds of stuff like that. So this is a high fantasy story set in strange, hard to pronounce lands with hard to pronounce character names.
And I don't care how bad the story is, because if you have maps and you have such lore behind it, I mean, you've gone all out. There's love.
Yeah.
And I need love in my story.
Yeah.
I don't need it to be good. I don't even need it to be readable. I just need love in my story and passion.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that this story is written by someone who is not a native English speaker. So, grammar, dialogue, formatting, who cares? We're here for the story, and if the story is good, then, we'll have praise for it, but we'll see.
Because, if anything, the grammar, the dialogue, that could be rewritten.
Yeah.
But the story, that idea is good. Well,
the story can also be rewritten. I mean,
as we now know.
Yes. Perhaps we'll get a chance to rewrite this one if it's not good.
We'll see.
Yeah. So, A Clash with the Blue Demons. Hit or miss, yet to be seen, but we're looking forward to it.
Come on, it's going to be a fucking hit. It's going to be a fucking hit. No doubt about it.
I mean, the struggle between good and evil is timeless. Thank you everyone for listening and supporting the show. We really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to subscribe and join in the conversation with us on one of our platforms. You can support the show through Patreon, and more so by simply sharing the podcast with your friends. If you have a book you want to suggest, just message us anywhere and we'll consider it for the show. Thanks.